How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing again. I hope you're having a good weekend, or you've had a good weekend because it's nearly over. Mine was all right. A bit chilly today, whatever. I was indoors most of the day anyway, so it don't matter. Anyway, I said on a previous couple of videos there's no boxing this weekend, and I've forgotten all about the Joe Smith Jr. Maiden defence of his title against somebody called Steve Geffrard, an American guy, 31 years old. I didn't know much about him at all. So I did what we all do. I went over to BoxRec, had a nosy at Mr. Geffrard's record. He was 18-2 going in. Interestingly, he lost his first two fights. Apparently he was a really good amateur. I don't really follow the amateur game that closely, but he did all right. And when he turned pro, there was a bit of a fanfare, but he lost his first two fights. And the first one, he lost to a guy called Kentrell Claiborne, journeyman, who was 2-6 at the time, and he got stopped in the third round. In the second fight, he lost to a guy who was 0-1-1, lost a 4-round decision. And since then, he racked up sort of 18 wins, but against very modest opposition. And the only, I suppose you'd say, recognisable name was Denis Grachev, who's slipped into that journeyman role, but at one point was, relatively highly touted. And he won an 8-round decision over Denis Grachev. So Mr. Geffrard didn't have a lot going for him statistically coming in, or at least in terms of opposition and preparation. He also only had 8 days to prepare because Smith Jr. Was supposed to fight Callum Johnson. I was predicting a Smith Jr. win by knockout in that fight, and I couldn't really comment on Geffrard because, like I said, I didn't know anything about him, but watched the fight, watched it back. I didn't watch it live, so I forgot all about it, but I watched it back it's on YouTube. Sky Sports, Sky Boxing are showing it. Get it while you can. It's not a bad little fight. It's all right, nothing wrong with it. The opening bell, and immediately what struck me was that Geffrard looked nervous. And I think one way of telling if a fighter's nervous is that they're not really looking to control the range. They're looking to sort of stave defensively very, very tight. And sure enough, Geffrard had that high guard. I mean, he'd really put the earmuffs on, peekaboo style, But he didn't seem concerned with the range. If Smith took a step back, he took a step back. If he went forward, if Smith took a step forward... if Smith took a step forward, he took a step back. If Smith took a step back, he'd go forward. He was always in that mid-range. He was never on the periphery of the range. He was never falling in close. And it kind of, I kind of got the impression he was a little bit tight, well, very tight actually, and not really thinking about what he was doing. He was thinking about what was coming at him. And there was a lot coming at him because Smith was letting his hands go. Very heavy-handed Smith, really looking to bang in the serious punches. Loves the overhand right, but both hands were going 10 to the dozen. Geffrard was not, he's not completely timid, don't get me wrong. This wasn't Avni Yildirim against Canelo Alvarez. Geffrard was throwing punches, and his jab looked pretty good, He was just very reactive, whereas the proactive one was Smith Jr. Now, this carried on until the third round. And for the first time in the third round, Smith Jr., who was really putting some meat on his punches, virtually every punch, he kind of stung. I wouldn't say he hurt him, but he stung Geffrard for the first time in the fight. And Geffrard, again, the earmuffs go on. He's not looking to counter punch. He's just looking to be very defensive. Very, very, very cautious, very, very reticent. And he was kind of waiting for Smith Jr. to shoot his bolt, and then he would reset himself. And Smith Jr., threw lots of punches, clearly won the first 3 rounds. The fourth round, he did kind of sting, or like hurt Geffrard for the first time, and he really put the heat on him. And if it was a case of Geffrard, because he had such short notice, only 8 days notice, thinking I'll take him into deep waters and then I'll try and get to the later rounds and then I'll come on strong because I'm not really that, I'm not fighting fit. He looked in shape, he looked fine, and he had Kevin Cunningham in his corner, and Kevin Cunningham doesn't normally waste time with with also rounds. You've got to have a bit of talent to get trained by him. But Geffrard was probably possibly thinking, or maybe his corner had the game plan. We'll take Smith, let Smith Jr. Fire everything, use up his energy, and then we'll take him into later rounds. If he was hoping for that, it weren't really working out, because for the first 4 or 5 rounds, it didn't really look to me like he had much of a game plan, unless it was that that I just mentioned. But I don't know. I wasn't convinced. Anyway, Smith's landing a lot of punches. He starts to vary his punches more, bringing in uppercuts. When Geffrard is on the ropes, he doesn't even try to move. Again, it's a case of covering up, waiting for Smith to finish, and then he might throw some punches. And again, Geffrard was throwing some punches. It wasn't as if he was completely inactive, but it was all reactionary. There didn't seem to be much method to what he was doing. Whereas, and in fairness, Joe Smith Jr. wasn't complicated. There was nothing scientific or sophisticated about what he was doing. He was just looking to hurt the guy and overwhelm him. So this continued, and then when we got to round 7, Geffrard really was hurt. He wasn't staggered badly, but you could tell the sheer volume of punches was getting to him. And between rounds 7 and 8, he actually said to Kevin Cunningham in the corner, "My left arm hurts. My left arm. There's something wrong with his left arm," he said. They were both orthodox fighters, so I suppose Geffrard had the option of turning southpaw maybe. The 8th was another clear round for Smith Jr. And in the 9th, within, I think, 40 seconds, it was over. Geffrard, his arm was visibly swelling. Clearly he had an injury to it. He got trapped near the corner on the ropes. Smith Jr. unloaded a barrage of punches. He'd actually lowered his punch output between rounds sort of 5 to 7, 8. Probably because he was using up such a huge amount of energy, and this was a 12-round fight. But in the 9th round, when he saw Geffrard was hurt, he unloaded big time. Geffrard went down, took a knee, got counted out, but I think Cunningham had stopped the fight anyway. He jumped on the ring apron and surrendered his fighter. So not a bad performance by Smith Jr. He hits hard. Again, there's nothing particularly sophisticated about him, but he's a come-forward fighter, throws lots of punches. This was his first defence of his light heavyweight title, WBO light heavyweight title. Would I pick him to beat Beterbiev? If Beterbiev makes the weight relatively easily, I would say he wins all night long. But, Smith Jr. ain't a bad fighter. I'd certainly have picked him to beat Callum Johnson. This was a decent little runaround, 8 and a bit rounds. First defence against a guy who had a statistically okay record, but when you analyse it, there really wasn't a great deal there. So yeah, it was okay. It was an okay fight, but obviously we want to see Smith in with bigger names. This wasn't his fault, Callum Johnson, buzzed positive for the Great Black Death. Geffrard, fair play to him, and he looked like he had some talent. Geffrard, he just, I don't know whether his self-belief is lacking. It looked to me like it was, but short notice opponent. Yeah, he did okay. It looked at times like a bit of a glorified sparring session, but at the same time, you get offered a payday, 8 days notice. It's a chance of a lifetime. Your career previously hasn't really gone anywhere, so you're going to take it, aren't you? And unfortunately, you couldn't pull it off, but we'll see what happens. Onwards and upwards for Mr. Joe Smith Jr. Did you see the fight? If not, check it out. Sky Sports Boxing on YouTube. Worth a look, just to see how Joe Smith's getting on and to compare him to Beterbiev and certain other fighters. But yeah, let me know what you think. If you're new to the channel and you could subscribe, that would be brilliant. Just hit the subscribe button. We're trying to build it up. I'm nearly at 200. We're nearly at 200 subscribers. So come on. Like the video, share the video. Thanks for your time, as always. I always appreciate you watching these videos, and we'll speak again sometime. Leave your comments below. Much love to all of you. Peace out.